My name is Chrissie and I am the kids team leader at Ashford Vineyard, and I am here today to read you our Easter bedtime story. Thank you for joining me. Now, you might not know this, but the Easter story begins right back at the beginning when God created the world. He made his kingdom. It was perfect. He made the beautiful world and he made his beautiful children who he loved. And when he made them, it was good. In fact, it was better than good. It was perfect. There was no sadness. There was no loneliness. There was no sickness. There was no fear. There was nothing to worry about. The world was perfect. But then it says in the Bible that people chose to do their own thing. They wanted to be as powerful as God. They wanted to have all the knowledge of God. And so they took something that God had asked them not to. And because of that, they couldn't come close to God anymore. When they broke the rules, they broke the perfect relationship that they had with God. God's heart broke. He knew that there would be a consequence. What we often call sin has come into the world, and it was there to stay. Because of the bad choices that people made, God knew that his children would always be trying to hide things from him. God knew that people would not be able to come close to him anymore, and that without him, they would die. God couldn't let his children live like that forever without him. God loved his children with an unrelenting, never-ending love, and so God hatched a plan like no other, to bring us back to him. We then, for this story, fast forward through the story of Noah's Ark, past Joseph's coat, past Moses, through the Passover festival, which we will come back to a little bit later, and all the way through to Christmas. Yes, Christmas, the next part of the Easter story. You see, at Christmas we celebrate Jesus' coming, a baby being born who was totally man and totally God, so much more than just a baby being born. And then Jesus lived his life perfectly, showing people what God was like, healing the sick, showing people freedom. And then you'll remember last Sunday we looked at the story where Jesus came into Jerusalem and the people welcomed him in like a king. They waved palm leaves and they celebrated his arrival. Now, the welcome that Jesus got as he came into the city would have attracted loads of attention, but not all of it would have been good attention. The religious leaders did not like the fact that the people were calling Jesus the Son of God. They didn't believe that Jesus was God's son, and they were jealous. I think they were also probably a little bit afraid. You see, Jesus had been saying lots of things that they didn't agree with. They didn't necessarily understand. They knew about God, but they didn't know his heart. They didn't know his plan. All that they knew was that they would have to get rid of Jesus, and quickly. Now, the reason Jesus was coming into Jerusalem and the reason there were so many people there was to celebrate the Passover festival. This was a big deal. It's a massive Jewish celebration of God setting his people free. Every year, the Jewish people come together and have a big meal together, and they remember that God rescued them from being slaves in Egypt. Every year they would kill a lamb and eat it together. They would say, the lamb died instead of us. Now, Jesus did something at that meal that his friends would probably have found a bit peculiar. He poured out the wine and he told them that it was his blood that was going to pour out. He broke some bread and told them that his body was going to break. His friends, though finding it a bit odd, knew that Jesus was likening himself to the Passover lamb, the lamb that was killed so that they could live. Jesus was telling his friends that he was going to be the one to die so that we could live, that his blood was going to be able to take away sin and death from everyone. He told them that whenever they eat and drink together, they should remember that he rescued them. So, Jesus and his friends, who probably had a whole load of emotions going on, were probably feeling a bit sad because Jesus had told them that at some point soon he was going to die. And they were probably feeling a bit overwhelmed because they had a really mixed evening, went to one of their favourite places. They went to a garden. Jesus knew the time had come for him to die. He and God had planned it. It wasn't a surprise to him, so he spent some time talking to God about it. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. Is there any other way to make it right again, he said. Any other way to rescue your children? But inside, Jesus knew the answer. He was going to have to die. He was going to have to take all the blame for all the brokenness, all the loneliness, all the fear, everything we do wrong, and he was going to have to die. And Jesus knew that because he was taking all the rubbish on himself, he would have to be separated from God. This made Jesus quite sad, but he knew he needed it to happen for the big rescue plan. So, Jesus was arrested in the garden and taken away. The Roman soldiers made fun of him. They called him a king and gave him a crown, but it wasn't a crown like we normally have in our Bible stories. It was a crown made of sharp, nasty thorns. They whipped him and they spat at him. Jesus had never done anything wrong, but they were going to kill him like a criminal. They nailed Jesus to the cross. The people didn't understand. They had seen what Jesus could do. They had seen him heal the sick and they'd seen him raise the dead. "Save yourself," they said. "You said you could save us, but you can't even save yourself." But Jesus stayed. Not because he was unable to save himself. He had the power for that. But because he loves us with that never-ending, that unstoppable love. It was all part of God's great plan. And in those final moments, as Jesus died, he cried out to God, "Dad, where are you?" But because he had all of the wrong things on him, for the first time ever, God and Jesus couldn't be close. And then it went dark. Even though it was the middle of the day, it was like God couldn't bear to look. The earth trembled and shook. And Jesus cried out, "It is finished!" And then he died. The soldiers made sure that Jesus was actually dead. And then his friends laid his body in a tomb. It was a bit like a cave in a rock. There was so much that they didn't understand. Why did Jesus have to die? Where had it all gone wrong? They didn't know anything anymore, but they just knew it all felt wrong. The religious leaders were happy. That's the end of Jesus, sorted. But just to be certain, they sent soldiers to guard the tomb and rolled a big stone in front of the entrance so no one could get in. I wonder how Jesus' friends must have felt at that point. I wonder whether they were sad or confused. Maybe they were cross. One thing I'm certain of is that they would have been scared. Someone who they loved and spent the best part of 3 years with had been killed. He was the person who was meant to rescue them, and he was gone. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Saturday was the rest day, so they couldn't do anything, and I imagine it was the longest Saturday ever. It must have been really hard for Jesus' friends because they didn't know what was going to happen. We all know the end of the story. Jesus' friends had got no idea. On the Sunday, some of them went to wash Jesus' body, to anoint it with oils, a sign of love for their friends. I guess it's a bit like laying flowers on a grave. But as they approached, they realised something wasn't right. The stone was rolled away, and as they got closer, they realised that Jesus' body had gone. They thought somebody might have stolen it, but then an angel appeared and told them not to be afraid. They were afraid anyway. And then he said, "Jesus isn't dead anymore, he's alive." Jesus even met with his friends in the garden and came back and ate and drank with them. It was the ultimate victory. But why am I telling you all about it? It's a story I'm sure you've heard before. Most of you will have heard it many, many times. What difference does it make today? Personally, I believe this story changes everything. I would like you to take a moment just to have a think about something. Where are you at the moment? If you have a pen and paper, maybe you could write it down or draw a picture. Jesus defeating death means that we can be close to God again. It shows us that God is bigger than the things that we get wrong. He's bigger than the things that make us sad and bigger than the things that make us afraid. I don't know what you're worried about, but I do know that Jesus has power over fear. I know he has power over loneliness. I know because Jesus defeated death, he has power over the brokenness. I know he has power over sickness. He's not thrown because of the coronavirus. He has power to defeat it because he is bigger and because Jesus dealt with it when he died on the cross. Now, sometimes doing something physical helps us release something spiritual. So if you wrote something down that you were worried about, screw it up. Throw it away. Because you know what? God has got it. He's sorted it. Jesus has dealt with it. It says in the Bible, give your worries and your anxiety to him because he cares for you. Now, you and I know that God doesn't force us to come close to him. He doesn't force us to be in his presence. We need to make a choice. Sometimes it feels like we're far away, but God is always there, asking us to let him come in. I don't know if you have ever said a yes to Jesus, but I would love for you to join me in praying. God, thank you that your love for me is unstoppable. Thank you that Jesus dying on the cross means I can now be close to you. I want to get to know you more. If you have never prayed a prayer like that before, let us know, because at Ashford Vineyard we would love to explore with you what knowing more of Jesus looks like. There are so many ways we can respond to what Jesus did on the cross. We can make lots of noise and sing lots of songs and dance around, which is often the way that I worship Jesus. But as it is close to bedtime today, we're going to do something a bit different. There is a special way that people who love God have been remembering God's rescue plan for thousands of years. And it all stems back to that meal that Jesus was having with his friends just before he died. It's something that in churches is sometimes called communion. Do you remember how Jesus took the bread and broke it up and poured out wine for his friends and told them to eat together and remember him together? Communion is a time for anyone who loves Jesus to come together and remember. Please join me in eating bread to remember that Jesus' body was broken so that we could be restored, so that our hearts and bodies that are broken and tired can be made right again. And when we drink together, we remember that Jesus' blood was shed so that we can come close to God again, so that we can be part of his family. The meal Jesus shared with his friends was a celebration because God rescued them, and that's what this is all about too. I'm really glad that you joined me this evening for our Easter bedtime story. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.